Please turn your Bible to Esther chapter 3 and verse 3. When the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command day after day?" they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore, they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated. For he had told them he was a Jew. He was asked in these two verses why he didn't bow before Haman. And for the first time, Mordecai reveals that he is a Jew. Up to this time, he has told no man. And you will remember that he instructed even Esther, his adopted daughter, not to let anyone know her background and her nationality. Even her husband, the king, did not know. But now Mordecai spills the beans. The reason I'm not bowing to Haman is because I am a Jew. He worships only the true and the living God. He will never bow before an image. He will never bow before man. He had been taught in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 4, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one Lord." He was to declare to the world, the ancient world, the unity of the Godhead. Today, in a world of atheism, we are to declare the Trinity, my friend, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Mordecai took a stand, and now the others know why. The Jew was known in the world of that day as a worshipper of the universal God of creation, the one and true God, not a local deity, but a universal God. Verse 5, and we'll also read verse 6 now. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was, you notice, enraged. Yet, having learned who Mordecai's people were, scorns the idea of killing only Mordecai, which he could have easily done. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Not kingdom of Persia, kingdom of Xerxes, which shows that Xerxes was a very powerful man. Mordecai's people were to be destroyed just because Mordecai did not pamper Haman's pride. In this passage, Haman reveals that he is a very small man. He should have ignored Mordecai. As Mordecai is beginning to stand out as a man of God, this man Haman begins to stand out in all his ugliness as a man of Satan. The first thing we notice is his smallness, is his littleness. We are going to note all the way through the story that Haman is a very little man. Mentally, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, in every way, maybe even physically. You will hear him a little later on crying on his wife's shoulder that Mordecai is not bowing before him. Haman is going to attempt to do a very terrible thing because his ego is hurt. He's going to try to destroy all the Jews that live in the kingdom of Xerxes. Every single Jew, not one exception. I'm sure he knew about God's promise to Abraham to bless those who bless the Jews and to curse those who curse the Jews, and that God makes good his promises. We have only to turn back the pages of history, my friend, to find out that the Jew has attended the funeral of every one of those nations that tried to exterminate him. If you try to kill God's people, you'll get killed. Don't mess with God's promises. Yes, God has promised to take care of his people. The fact that they have not been exterminated till date is itself miraculous, because every leader, barring a few, sought to exterminate the Jews. Anti-Semitism. God has indeed preserved them. And we will see how God does this in the book of Esther. It's a beautiful, wonderful book on God's providence. Verse 7 now. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, they cast the pur, that is the lot, in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. The first month, the lot is cast. It falls on the 12th month. The month has been decided when every single Jew would be exterminated in the whole land of Xerxes, the land of Persia. Each day Haman's irritation grows. Every time he goes to the gate, everybody goes down on their face except one man, the Jew Mordecai, and this disturbs him. You see, now he resolves to do something about it. When Mordecai does not bow down, Haman discovered this refusal to bow down by Mordecai. It was based on his faith convictions. He decided that a nationwide massacre of the Jews would solve his problem. In other words, a cleansing, an ethnic cleansing of the Jews. Haman had the magicians cast the lot called Pur to decide which day of the year the Jews would be destroyed. What the magicians and Haman did not realize was that God was the one who disposed the lot. God not only ruled, but he overrules in every situation. The lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar, which allowed time for Haman's plot to be discovered and stopped. Haman was a master schemer, a master strategist, a master manipulator. Notice verse 8. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed and scattered among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, whose customs are different from those of all other people, and who do not obey the king's laws." Notice, he puts the ball into the king's court. He says that these people do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the best interest of the king to tolerate them. And if it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them. I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for the men who carry out this business. Not only does he suggest that the Jews be decimated, he also pays for their destruction. Haman brought it to the attention of King Xerxes that there were some people living in the kingdom who were very different, unusual, followed Mosaic law. They were a people who should be exterminated. He convinced the king that the Jews were defying the king's laws and their liquidation should be and bring a lot of wealth into the treasuries from their confiscated properties. You will remember that Xerxes had recently been engaged in a war. Every war is a costly affair, friends. He needed money to pay for the bills incurred. Perhaps Haman's idea would be to bring enough money to take care of the deficit that the king had incurred through that war. The king, of course, was interested in that plan. Most officials are interested in ways in which they can raise money. And this seemed like a way out for the king, because he was caught in quite a quagmire of debt and deficit. And now Haman decides a beautiful way in which he can get out of it. Xerxes had so little regard for life, we notice, as most potentates of that day did, that he did not inquire, not even inquire, who the people Haman wanted to exterminate were. Haman doesn't know that Esther the queen happens to belong to the same race he wants to disgrace. Xerxes himself does not know that his queen is Jewish and that he's signing away her life at this time. You notice what he does in verse 10. The king took out his signet ring from his finger, gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and the enemy of the Jews. Notice how Haman is defined here, the enemy of the Jews. King Xerxes took a ring off his finger and gave it to Haman. This ring was the signet ring. The signet ring on the finger was pressed down on soft wax, and that became the signature of the king. An order that had the signet ring stamped on it became the law of the kingdom. So friends, this is what is going to happen. Xerxes carelessly takes off his ring and hands it to Haman. He says, in effect, I don't care what you're going to do, but here's the ring. He had dissipated the wealth of the kingdom against the Greece. Friends, it is variously estimated how many men perish in that campaign against the Greece. Some feel that as many as 2 million men died in that war. And even this didn't seem to bother Xerxes one bit, that so many had given up their lives for a mistake that the king had made. Now, his eyes closed, he's about to launch into another huge blunder. Verse 11. Keep the money, the king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please. Then on the 13th day of the first month, royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of the king Xerxes himself, sealed with his own signet ring. Dispatches or couriers were sent to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, a bloodbath, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. Verses 11 to 13. This decree to destroy the Jews goes out as a law of the Medes and the Persians. It took quite an effort to get this word out because, as you will recall, this empire stretched from India all the way across Asia and down through the Fertile Crescent and the Mediterranean Sea. It included some of Europe, all of Asia Minor, reached into Africa through Egypt and to Ethiopia. A vast kingdom. In it were people speaking many languages, a minimum of 127 languages. Also, we have to take into account that there were tribes speaking various dialects in these provinces. This law had to be translated into many languages and tongues. It was quite a huge government project. The scribes had the job of translating and making copies of the law. This was a huge undertaking. When the copies were made to cover the entire kingdom, they went out by camel, by donkey, by runners, and by messengers. On a certain day, the Jews were going to be exterminated. This law was giving anti-Semitism full reign, permitting a great many people to do what apparently was in their hearts to do. On this designated day, it would be legal to kill Jews, neighbors killing neighbors. It would be a terrible sight. This decree went out as a law of the Medes and the Persians. We were told again and again at the very beginning of this book that a law once made was irrevocable. This law would not be changed, not be repealed. Another law, we will find out, was to be issued that counteracted it. Yet, this law had to stand on the books. Verse 14 now, a concluding verse for the day. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as a law. The edict was to be made a law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. Spurred on by the king's command, the couriers went out, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city of Susa was bewildered. Verses 14 and 15 of Esther chapter 3. The Jews were not traitors. They had not committed great crimes. Why should extreme measures be used like this to exterminate them? They were not criminals. Although they may not have liked the Jews and consider them foreigners with differing customs, the city's inhabitants did not want to exterminate them. They could not understand Xerxes permitting a decree like this to go out. At the palace late that evening, you could see riders getting their orders. Hundreds of men must have been pressed into service because of the extent of the kingdom. You could see these different riders being given different copies of the new decree that had become law of the Medes and the Persians. One company started riding on the road to the south, another to the north, another to the west, and the fourth to the east. They rode all night. When they came to a little town, they would nail on a bulletin board of that town the decree for the people to read the next morning. When the riders kept going, when their horses got tired, they were given fresh horses to carry out their murderous job. All over the kingdom is spread the decree that the Jews are to perish, are to be decimated. Notice the expression hastened. They are hastened, we are told, by the king's commandment. Yes, friends, the city of Susa was bewildered, was in a state of shock, were confused. They didn't know why that these people who weren't a threat had to be treated in such a way. But it didn't bother the king. He sits with Haman, sits to drink that evening. What the king did not realize, what the decree was going to touch his own queen. Even Nero did this, friends. When Rome was burning, Nero was enjoying himself. Today this nation is going to perish. But notice what Xerxes does with the enemy, his own enemy. He's having a drink. The law ordering the extermination of the Jews was signed by the king himself. It became the law of the Medes and the Persians. There was no way it could be changed. How will God save his people? Another decree will have to be made. Somebody is going to have to intervene. God, by the way, has been preparing for this exact same thing. When we first began to study this little book, we talked about the providence of God. We looked at a scene at a pagan palace. A drunken orgy was taking place. Several thousand people were attending a banquet. Family scandal is then revealed. The queen refuses to obey the king and then is put aside. What does this have to do with God saving his people? Friend, it has everything to do with it. God was moving and he is going to continue to move in his own perfect, mighty way, in a way that he alone does so beautifully. He has placed a person right next to the throne. She is going to be the means of saving the Jews. God moves in the affairs of men by his providence. God moves, friends, as I said earlier, quoting that beautiful hymn, in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. However grim, however disconcerting the circumstances that surround us may be, God, my friend, is above all circumstances, above all powers, above all kings, above all nations, above all the ways of man. Faith in God makes great optimists. Friends, the prospects of the people of Israel are just as bright as the promises of God. Your prospects as bright as God's promises. May God bless you richly.